Good evening and welcome to the campus of UW-Whitewater. I'm your host, Sam Matheny. Alongside me today is Brian Hanrahan. We ask you to please excuse our momentary interruption of sports from your regular daily schedule. In today's episode, we will discuss the salary cap situations in each sport along with some other interesting key facts. Let's get right into it. And it has been well documented the small market team's salary versus the big market teams in Major League Baseball is there's some disparity there. Should there be a hard salary cap for all teams or should it stay the same in the MLB?
I believe that there should be a hard salary cap, but I also think it's just as important that they implement a salary floor because you have a team like the Dodgers who they have a $267 million payroll. That's almost $60 million over the luxury tax. Compare that to a team like the Indians with the lowest payroll in all of baseball at $50 million. That's a five-fold difference. And so I think it's just as important that they implement a salary floor to force these owners to put more money into their teams. If they're not putting it into their players, at least they'll put it into player development, and then they can be better in the future. But I don't think it's unreasonable to ask these billionaire owners to put more money into their teams.
Now, before I go on to what I want to say here, do you think that this is all the fault of the owners? I want to ask you that. Is it the owners' fault that these teams aren't making the same amount of money, or do you think it's just because they're not generating enough revenue?
I think that could definitely play a role in it. However, I think there's teams like the Tampa Bay Rays who they can certainly generate enough revenue. They've had enough success the past few years where they should be able to generate the revenue that they need in order to function and be a good baseball team. However, they're just deciding to be a poor man's imitation of the Dodgers, where the Dodgers even poach their GM and they have a really smart analytics team and their front office is extremely intelligent. They just have an owner who's not willing to put the money into the team, and now that's causing things like threats to relocate to Montreal or elsewhere, whereas the problem with the team right now is they're not in Tampa, which is why nobody comes to the games.
I'll disagree with that. I think Tampa's a pretty big city. You know, they have like a bunch of they have the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have the Buccaneers. I think that's a big city. I can see where you're saying though, because there's so many teams in the MLB, the NHL, and the NBA that are all within the state of Florida, but Florida's a pretty big state. So I would say that, yes, the salary cap, there should be a salary cap and a salary cap floor, but at the same time, I just think there's too much money involved with these baseball players.
So you think that these contracts should maybe be shrunk down a little bit?
Agreed, yeah, because half these players can't even go up to what they're worth. You see a player like Bryce Harper making $300 million. Yeah, it took him a few years with the Phillies to finally get good until he was really good this season. But at the same time, I still think that, these players are getting paid way too much.
I can totally agree with that. I mean, you have a guy like Trevor Bauer who prior to this season and all the things that went down with him, he was making about as much as the current Indians payroll. He was making, I believe, about $40 million a year. So I do agree that these players probably are getting paid too much. I mean, you have people just throwing out a hypothetical $300 million contracts for upcoming free agents. I think it's a bit ridiculous.
Is Christian Yelich worth half the salary, essentially, of this Milwaukee Brewers team?
I think at the time that we signed him, that was, I believe, July of 2020 or so, I think at the time he was worth it because he had 2 MVP caliber seasons, probably would have had back-to-back MVPs if he didn't shred his knee by hitting a baseball into it in, September of 2019. He would have certainly been the MVP that season.
Next up, we will discuss the NBA salary cap. We'll be right back. Please excuse this commercial break.
We'd love to show you what it's like to be a war hawk.
Come on!
Don't miss out on your chance to be a war hawk.
At UW-Whitewater.
You belong here!
UW-Whitewater Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
Here at UW-Whitewater Intramural Sports, we have a motto: a sport for everyone and everyone in a sport.
The ball! Accepted anyways. They're going to count it.
Had a blast. Always have fun at intramurals.
Every day we strive to go above and beyond that goal by providing healthy exercise, promoting leisure education, and giving students that competitive atmosphere they are looking for.
Yes. Yes!
It's exciting. Brings me back to those high school days with Friday Night Lights.
With our 25 different intramural sports offered, we guarantee that we have a sport for you. Go to our website and find your sport today.
Welcome back to Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from Your Regular Daily Schedule. The NBA uses a soft cap, which means teams can exceed the salary cap amount as long as they pay additional taxes. Should the NBA go to a hard cap or keep it as a soft one?
I think they should go to a hard cap because you have teams that are paying these players exorbitant amounts, and honestly, most of the time, sometimes they aren't worth that money that they're getting paid. You have guys like Nick Batum and Rudy Gobert who are just getting paid way more than they need to be.
I disagree. I think Rudy Gobert is one of those players that, he's won Defensive Player of the Year, 2 or 3 times already? I think he's definitely worth the money, and I think this whole game is not about offense.
I understand that, but in the modern NBA, you can't get away with just defense alone. He's almost like a modern-day Rodman, except Rodman was at least entertaining. Gobert, he's only defense, and he doesn't do anything on offense. He's essentially Brook Lopez, but without the offense.
I mean, you look at their team, though, they have so many good pieces that they can work around. But going back to the original question, I really think that they should have a hard cap because that makes teams not be able to have like super teams like the Lakers and the Nets.
I totally agree with you there. There's teams like the Lakers who can just throw money at everyone and it's not a big deal to exceed the tax. But I also think that they need to limit these contracts that players are getting. Rudy Gobert, regardless of what you think of him, if you think he's really good or whatever, he's certainly not worth a max contract.
Yeah, but I have another question for you about that. I honestly do think he's worth that contract, but with players getting supermax just everywhere, everyone's being paid $100 million. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's a waste of money, or do you think it should be a lot smaller and they should be using their money elsewhere?
I think it is a waste of money. I think there's way too much money going to players who probably don't deserve it. There's just too much throwing money around at players who just aren't worth it these days.
And with the hard salary cap, do you think that commissioners like Adam Silver, I get that he's done a lot for the NBA, should he be enforcing this more?
I think he should be enforcing it more. I think it's his role and his duty as commissioner to enforce it and to make sure that these teams aren't giving out these horrible contracts to players.
Now, another question for you. When it comes to the G League, in our last episode, we talked about the G League and should players be going there or should they actually have a one-and-done rule? Do you think that going to the G League or coming right out of college, do you think that really impacts, how much they're getting paid?
I think it does impact how much they're getting paid. I think that if a player goes straight to the G League, it could help them in that they're going to be getting paid right away as opposed to college where you're at college. And if you go to the G League, you're with players who maybe have been in the NBA before, and then you're getting paid and you can learn how to manage your finances and hopefully not go bankrupt within your first 3 years of being in the NBA.
And that's the thing, though, is that so many of these players, they have financial burdens, or they're just broke after their first 2 years in the league because they don't know how to manage the money. Now, when it comes to super teams like the Lakers and Nets, are you a fan of these super teams, or do you think it should be changed and more, implemented with the hard and soft salary cap?
I am not at all a fan of these super teams. I mean, we saw it last decade. We had Warriors-Cavs NBA Finals for 4 years in a row. A couple of years, okay, it's cool, it's a great rivalry. Celtics-Lakers, that's an all-time great rivalry. But at the same time, seeing it 4 years in a row, you kind of want something new. And I know a lot of people got jaded from seeing that because we want some new teams. We don't just want the Warriors steamrolling the Cavs 3 out of 4 years.
That's fair, and I think that these teams, maybe they were just super good. Maybe the teams did what they were supposed to do. So I actually argue and disagree with you on that because those teams actually did what they were supposed to do, and they got their team the way they are. Now you look at today's NBA. Yes, LeBron was 7 of the last 10 years he's in that time period. He was actually, making the NBA Finals, but at the same time, I think it's just, he's just been so successful, and the teams that he's been on have been doing well. And next up, we will discuss the NFL salary cap. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
On. Flip them off. 91.7 WSUW. 91.7 is a student-run radio station serving the Whitewater area with a variety of original programs, live sports broadcasting, community events, and more. So turn us on. 91.7 FM. Or stream us live at 917theedge.com.
UW Whitewater Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
As an Army ROTC cadet at Whitewater, you have the opportunity to develop into a great leader while learning and applying the Army values to your everyday life. Within ROTC, you have the chance to travel overseas in the CULP program to train with other militaries, attend many elite Army schools such as Airborne and Combat Diver, and you have the opportunity to attend conferences and guest lectures by some of the Army's top-ranking officers. Our Warhawk cadets participate in many extracurricular activities, Division III sports, Greek life, intramural sports, among many other team building and community service events. Being a cadet at Whitewater is more than just being part of the Army. It's also about being active members in our community and coming together to form a family atmosphere. Anyone who wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves while developing themselves professionally should consider UW Whitewater ROTC. To sign up for UW Whitewater ROTC, go to the 4th floor of McCutcheon Hall to room 417.
Welcome back to Please Excuse Our Momentary Interruption of Sports from your regular daily schedule. The National Football League has a hard cap, which means in no circumstances can a team surpass the specified amount. With many teams struggling to be cap compliant, should they keep it the same as soft, or should they have it changed to be a soft salary cap?
I think they should keep it as a hard salary cap because of the fact that it keeps the teams competitive and it keeps all the teams within each other in terms of salary, and you don't have a situation like the Dodgers where you have them completely exceeding the cap and just blowing everyone away in payroll.
I'd agree with that. I think, but at the same time, with a hard cap, teams can't resign other players who want more money. So they have to stick out with those players. And, do you think the running back is the most replaceable or the most overpaid? Let me rephrase that. Do you think the running back position is the most overpaid position in the NFL?
I don't think it is. I think you have guys like Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones who are succeeding on their second contracts thus far. I personally think that kickers are the most replaceable. I mean, the last decade or so, we've seen teams just churn through kickers. You had guys like Roberto Aguayo, who was a stud out of Florida State, ends up being out of the league after about 2 seasons because he just couldn't cut it. Kickers are definitely the most replaceable position. You get one and he's good and you stick with him for a long time, like Mason Crosby, cool, you stick with him. If you don't, oh well, you go look for another one, they're a dime a dozen.
Now, there's a few running backs that I think are actually worth more than or worth what they're being paid. But I disagree. I really think that the running back is the most overpaid position because the average lifespan is about 6 years. You see running backs come into the league, they leave. Todd Gurley, you have players like Devontae Freeman who had a big season for the Falcons a few years ago, and those players just haven't really been doing what they need to do, especially when it comes to Christian McCaffrey, who gets injured every year. That's why I think the running backs, obviously, they get hurt the most because they're being hit the most, but at the same time, I still think that they're the most overpaid position in the league because they're not there for that long, and they pay them the same amount as if they would pay a quarterback or a wide receiver.
I understand what you're saying there, but I think the Christian McCaffrey situation is a little bit different. He was basically the only thing the Carolina Panthers have had the past couple of years, and so they relied on him so heavily, and that's obviously going to take a toll on his body. If you have a guy like Aaron Jones, who it was notorious for Mike McCarthy to not use him early on in his career, he doesn't have that much mileage, he signs a second contract, and now he's blossoming in that second contract. And so I think it's really less about the contract, it's more on the teams to smartly manage the load of the running backs and make sure that the running backs are not getting overused or they're not getting worn out after just a couple seasons.
And we see that playing true, especially with the Green Bay Packers. They have A.J. Dillon as their backup. You don't need 2 elusive backs out of the backfield. Sometimes you need a power back and someone who can come back in on third down situations. So I'd agree with that. I think that like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are good 1-2 punch when it comes to what they can use.
I totally agree with you there. I think teams need to shy away more from the big physical bruising backs because those are the guys that aren't going to last as long. I mean, you have a guy like Derrick Henry, but I mean, he is just a unicorn. He's so fast, and he can just plow through anyone and stiff arm anyone into oblivion. I think they need more guys who are like an Aaron Jones, who are more of an elusive back.
Tampa Bay returned all 22 starters from the Super Bowl team in 2020 to 2021. Do you think that had anything to do with salary cap at all?
I don't think it did. I think most of those players were already under contract for this season. And so I think it was just a matter of, are they going to be starting or not? And obviously they are starting because, well, they won a Super Bowl, so they're obviously good enough to start. So I think that had more to do with it than the contract.
In addition to that, I'd say that those players who are on the Tampa Bay, they play with Tom Brady. They've seen what he's done in New England, so I think that's why they're sticking with it and actually playing with him because they kind of buy into his offense and his defense. And I think Bruce Arians is doing a great job down in Tampa.
I totally agree with you there. Bruce Arians has done a fantastic job. And also Tom Brady, I mean, he's won so many Super Bowls, so obviously guys are going to want to play with him. They know they have a chance to win a Super Bowl with him. So with the contracts, maybe they're willing to take a pay cut in order to play with him.
Next up, we give our opinions on the NHL salary cap. We'll be right back here on PEOMIOSFYRDS.
What does it mean to be a Warhawk?
It means allowing myself to dream big and think outside the box.
Pushing the limits of what I think is possible.
Seeing ideas through from start to finish.
Collaborating with professors and peers.
And seizing opportunities in the community to put my knowledge to use.
I'm studying abroad,
learning another language,
and listening to the stories of others.
I'm making lifelong friends and fearlessly sharing my gifts with the world.
As a Warhawk, I stay balanced,
take great care of myself,
and get out of my comfort zone.
I refuse to let the past determine my future.
And I'm taking confident steps in the direction of my dreams.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense.
And other times it couldn't be more exciting.
But I will keep my goals in mind
and never quit.
because
that's the Warhawk way.
UW Whitewater Athletics, a relentless pursuit of excellence across 22 sports, powered by a tradition of success. 20 national championships, 17 since 2002. 61 individual national titles. 24 National Athletes of the Year. 616 All-Americans. 115 Conference Scholar Athletes of the Year. 1,500 community service hours annually. Be a part of the tradition and join the Warhawk family.
The NHL also features a hard salary cap like the NFL. The Tampa Bay Lightning were able to go over the salary cap and still won the Stanley Cup. After an NHL investigation, they found nothing violated the rules. Should more teams try to do what the Lightning did?
I think more teams should try to do what the Lightning did. But I also think it's a good thing that the NHL does have such a hard salary cap because of the fact that in the 2010s, in the decade of the 2010s, I should say, you had 13 different teams make the Stanley Cup Finals. That was tied with the NFL for the most different teams to make the championship round of a league in the 2010s decade. And so I don't think anyone should be upset that the Lightning were able to go a little bit over the cap and won 2 championships in a row. I think it's a testament to how smartly their team is run, and they were able to do it without doing anything that was wrong in the eyes of the league, which I think is a smart thing that other teams should try to emulate, excuse me.
I disagree 100%. They were $18 million over the salary cap. Defenseman Dougie Hamilton said that they lost to a team, the Tampa Bay Lightning, with that much. I don't think that's even fair, because that'd be like the MLB, having, let's say they had a salary cap, and then you pay players like, let's see, the Yankees, Garrett Cole, you pay him way more than you need to. I still think that's not fair because, they have a hard salary cap and they need to keep it that way.
I understand that, but I think their main issue should be raising the salary cap because currently they have by far the lowest salary cap in the league. I mean, there's about a $20 million difference in payroll between the highest team that has payroll and the team with the lowest payroll. So I think it's more important that they raise that payroll, because they raise that salary cap, because of the fact that you have guys in this league that are getting, a $5 million a year contract. Another league, that's a drop in the bucket, but in the NHL, that could be a death sentence. I mean, you have contracts like the Ryan Suter and Zach Parise contracts, where, those contracts ended up being terrible. I think teams need to manage their contracts better, and they need to be smarter about it. But I think it's also on the league to raise the salary cap and make it so that teams can have a little bit more margin for error.
Now, do you think that NHL players should be getting paid more?
I absolutely do think they should be getting paid more. I mean, you look at their contracts and the superstars' contracts in comparison to superstars in other leagues, it's pennies in comparison. I mean, it's absolutely nothing.
Do you think it's because they don't generate enough revenue, though?
I don't think so. The NHL isn't some poverty league. I think the salary cap is too low, and they're just not paying the players as much as they should be.
That will do it for us here tonight. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time to hear more hot takes all around the world of sports. This has been PEOMIOSFYRDS on UWW-TV.